I'm Fight, and today I want to talk about vibe coding. Now, vibe coding as a concept doesn't really appeal to me personally, because I think as we do it right now, unchecked, it tends to lead to an accretion of unmanaged technical debt, which isn't great. But I think as a testbed and benchmark for LLM integrations, it's actually very useful. And so that's how we're going to look at it today. Now, what I've done to explore this concept with assistance and integrations in Glamorous Toolkit is I've looked at the World Bank API documentation. I pulled out the first URL that I think returns JSON. I converted in the snippet as into a URL, and I retrieve the contents. And if I do this, I get some JSON back. Rather, I get a byte string back that represents some JSON. It has something to do with wind energy, something to do with documents. I don't exactly know what it does. And so we're now going to use the built-in assistants that are already in Glamorous Toolkit to try and vibe code ourselves into a model. So to do this, the first thing that we're going to do is to open a chat on the snippet. And I'm going to, instead of using one of the actions that this understands already, I'm going to use the chat field to just kind of describe my request, which is to propose a wrapper class that takes this data, updates the snippet to use it, and adds some views for good measure. Now it will propose a plan of action here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to confirm it before I really read it, and then go through it with you while it works. Now what it says it's going to do is propose a wrapper class, just as I said, and then update the snippet and add some flow views showing basic information. This confirmation, that is a workflow that is part of the experimental branch of Glamorous Toolkit. You can see how to enable experimental LLM features in the Glamorous Toolkit book, but basically it is a way of telling the model to give you a plan of action before it actually goes and does things. Now, it looked up a bunch of documentation and is now done proposing code, but instead of looking at what it describes here, I'm just going to go for the code and kind of mostly blindly try to accept it. Now it says there, it defines a subclass, and the coders, now all these method coders updated to use that class. It has an initialize, with a hardcode URL. I don't like that too much, but we're going to take it for now. An accessor here, something that does some JSON wrangling, view, and then what is this? There's another view, and then the updated snippet, which just says WDS API wrapper new. So ideally we would inject this URL, right? But I'm gonna keep it like this for now. It says, okay, this is the API, and it has 11 entries, interesting. And it gives us the result titles. So that's nice. That's nice enough. Now, oftentimes, it won't generate perfect code, but this is good enough to go for now. I'd probably go here and prompt it to instead inject this URL. I could do this in the chat, but I'm gonna take it for this demo. And it looks like there's an empty title here. I don't know whether this is also in the data. This is to be, I guess, to be determined. But I want this to maybe be a bit of a nicer view. Maybe there are other things in here in the results, right, that I want to see. So instead, result titles, I'm going to go here and open a new chat. We're not going to reuse the snippet chat. What we're going to do is now we're going to go on the method and open a chat on the method. Now, if you open this, you will see that it has it has different actions here that it knows. But what I'm going to ask it is to convert this view into a columned list that shows more properties of the result instead of just the titles. Now, ideally what this will do is maybe it's going to ask for confirmation, maybe it's just going to do things right away. Right. Okay, that looks great. I didn't really read it, but I skimmed what it wanted. I'm going to leave this open so you can read it if you want while you're watching this video. But maybe it's going to go now and kind of do as I told it and make a column list. Maybe it's not going to understand the data. So this looks interesting. Self-JSON data. So this accessor doesn't exist. So this view is not going to work correctly yet. I'm going to accept it anyway and see what this does. Column list titles. And so this is going to error, right? It doesn't understand JSON data. And here, you know, because this is not a vibe coding application, this is just an assistant, sometimes things go wrong. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just not use an accessor. And already, okay, so this looks great. Right, I have a result with details, and that looks nice. Now, I can go from here and I can refine this view myself, or with the help of the LLM, I can either spawn a new chat or go for the old chat as I want. Or I can open a third different chat now. Now, we talked about so far about a snippet, and we've talked about a method, which are both kind of similar but a little bit different. And now what we can do from here is we can also chat about the live object. Now, I can ask it to explain the object to me, just kind of get a feel for what it sees in there, because I still don't really understand what these publications are, to be honest. Although this already gives me a pretty good view. Now, World Bank Development Sources API. Okay, so I already know what the API is called, so that's great. I don't really know what it does, but it has regions, sectors, document types, So I kind of now know better what the object is and what it does, and it already has a few views. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it just to propose a new view, just so we can see how you would then work with an existing object once you've willed one into assistance. And you can tell it what kind of views it wants to, what kind of view you want, but I didn't tell it what kind of view I want. And so what it's now doing is it looked up what views are already there, which makes sense. If you want to propose a new view, you might as well look at what's already there, right? So it looked at the column titles list, which is this one, the titles list, which I believe is this one, and the summary, which I think is this one. Now, propose an official, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Propose a tree view is what I'm going to go for. And I think with lists and column lists, it often goes well. And then the more complicated the views are, the more it makes mistakes. Especially with graphical views right now, because it doesn't really understand the graphical stack behind Glamorous Toolkit very well. But we can now look at whether the tree actually worked. So this interests me. It doesn't, because ordered collection doesn't understand group by. So here you can see it getting a little bit confused by the various Smalltalk dialects having different APIs. Some do have group by, I believe, but in Pharaoh, this I believe is called grouped by. So we're just gonna do this again by hand, and this highlights that we're not quite vibe coding, right? This requires me to understand that there is a grouped by view. And so I'm going to do this, but now I can see that this is by region grouped the documents. So this is nice. It's already pretty useful because I now understand, okay, so this wind energy data publications, whatever they are, they're mostly in Eastern and Southern Africa, and actually the other regions don't really have many publications in this particular data set, it looks like. So already I understand much more about the data than I did before. And although I have to prompt and prod and do a bit of work, I did not have to understand the layout of the data. I did not have to code very much, but I did have to know what I'm doing. And I think that's kind of a nice middle ground between the unchecked vibe coding and just doing it all by hand. And another thing here that I want to highlight is that we looked at 3 different chats. They all have the same interface, and they all kind of deal with the same thing, which is code and entities. But they look at it from slightly different angles, and so they have different interaction models, almost. And I believe that's all I have for today. If you are interested in learning more, I suggest downloading GT and just playing with the code from the book or diving into the GT for LLM documentation. If you join our Discord, you also get a few of those demos just peppered into your day. And you can talk to me and many like-minded individuals if you so desire. That's all I have. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.